Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first webinar of Certara University's Express Webinar Series for 2021. With this series, we hope to give you some tips and understanding of Certara software. My name is Anna Henry. I'm a Senior Director of Training at Certara. And today, I will be giving you some tips for Phoenix with NALIN, especially how to calculate relative actual time when you only have dates and times in your data set. All right, so let's get started. I'd like to start by reminding you that this is a 30-minute webinar. You all have been muted, and thus to ask questions during the webinar, please use the questions panel at the right of your screen. I will address as many questions as possible at the end of the webinar. The topics of this webinar will be covered via demonstration mostly. I will describe what we're trying to accomplish to start with, and then show you several examples. And these examples would differ on how maybe the calendar date may be entered, different formats that you may encounter. And I will also cover how to use dates and times within a Phoenix model. Although I'm doing this demonstration using Phoenix version 8.3 for this demo, the core functionality exists in all the versions of Phoenix, so you should be able to apply these to all the versions of Phoenix. All right, so we'll get started. So I would like to start with, what do we really want to accomplish? I'm going to just go ahead and create a new project, and I'll call this demo, and import a data set. My case is this raw data CSV data set, which has a units of row. Okay. So it has this units row here. Going to finish it, and I have imported. So let's take a look at this data set. It has a column of date, has a column of time, concentration, and dose. In this concentration at the beginning, I had BQLs, and then I have a dose. This patient, ID number 1, has 2 visits, so you can see how the date increases from this January 19th to January 20th, okay? And this is September. The second one has more deviation, so it was given a dose at 8 and then at 8:31. So if I had something like this, what I really want to do is quickly be able to manipulate this data to have a relative actual time calculated, so I can send this data to a data management, a data wizard. And ideally, all I want to do is to be able to put a template here, and in version 8 and above, these are called object settings. I have already one that I have created, which uses separate dates and time. I can apply it, say, yes, I want to apply that, run it, and get what I'm looking for, which is this relative actual time. Let me expand this so you can see it. So now it has calculated from the first dose, then the next observation was half an hour, etc., and even at 24, even if the date changed. And you can see that for ID number 2, there were more deviations, so those have been calculated. So this is our goal. This is what I'm trying to show you today, and now we're going to go into more of the details of how to go about what is this template that I put, what did it have. So we're going to go through some of the steps. And I'm going to start, the data changes depending on the format that I'm showing you. But in this case, I'm going to start with a simple case where within the same date, so these dates here are not changing. They're all January 19th, 2019, and we have different times. So this is kind of my simple example. You might have just not, it has a really fast half-life, so you don't have to measure that far. And within at hour 20 already of the same day, you have finished. So this is a 24-hour clock. In this case, what I can do is send it to a data wizard under the data management. And I want to take advantage of an action that is a transformation. And this action is a baseline transformation type. If you're not familiar with that, they usually set up for pharmacodynamics to do kind of change from baseline, but I can trick it to do a change from baseline using time. How does this work? So let's say that here I want to calculate a relative actual time. I'll just call it RAT for now. And I can select a baseline option instead of from a fixed point to the minimum per group, meaning that within a subject, so this will remind me that I have to sort by ID, I'm going to look at the minimum number and calculate a change from there. But because I have dates and times, I can use a date and time format. In my case, the date here doesn't change, so I can just use time. I'm going to use this time column that is now a requirement to map it to the time start. Okay. And I need an X column. You know you need that because it's in orange. I'm going to try first to do a concentration. It's not going to work, but I want to show you this. And what I'm teaching you here is about the baseline transformation. So when I run this, you will see here on the right-hand side, that I've gotten this calculation, but it doesn't look correct. What is happening? Well, it is because my BQL concentration is not considered a number. The minimum per group, it's considered this time, 830. And then it's calculating from 830, which is not what I wanted. So what do I need to do? I need to have a column that has numeric values all through it. So I can just add another transformation. I'm going to be creating a column. So I'll just make a quick custom and I'll call this ref num, for example, and set this formula to a numeric number like 99. Now this needs to be before the previous transformation. So I'm just going to go ahead and move it up. So I'll take the step 2 here and move it up to step 1. Okay, when I'm just creating ref number. And then in my baseline transformation that I have to change the X column to this ref number instead of concentration. I can run it, and you will now see that it has calculated the relative actual time correctly. Okay, so this was a simple example that I'm only using the time. So let's move on to other examples where here you have actual dates and time. I have put several formats here to show you that all of these are acceptable and they work. You can have dates that have hyphens, that have slashes, that have spaces. You can have months. I'm using the US settings in my Windows. So a numeric like this, 01/1919, is read as January 19, 2019. If you were using, for example, UK settings, this would be read incorrectly because this would be the date, and then this would be the month, which will give you an error. Okay, so it depends a little bit of your Windows settings, but all of these are acceptable, even if you have the month in front of the date, but it has to be spelled out. So if you spell January completely, or you use the abbreviation of 3 letters, Jan, this will work. Okay, and then in this particular case, I have a 24-hour clock, so this is 8 o'clock at night, and I have another one that I will show you that it also works, where you have AM and PM. You can have a space, you can have uppercase or lowercase. So there's many formats that are accepted in this type of calculation. Once you have the date and the time, even if your date changes from here, I'm going from January 19th to the 20th to the 21st, it will take all these into account in the baseline calculation. So how would you go about this? I would take this data set, send it to a data wizard, and as we saw before, I'm going to label this one so I know where I am. I'm just going to call it 02 data wizard. As we saw before, the first action is going to be sure that I have a a column that has everything is numeric. So I'm just going to put a ref num, okay? And I'll set it to 99. And so that's my first step. Then I'm going to add another step. And in this one is where I'm going to use the baseline. I'm going to do a change from baseline. I'm just going to call this temp1 because the name of this column is not important to me. What I really want to is this created transform time column. I pick the minimum per group. I tell the system this is a date and time format. Okay, so it's expecting a date and time. Let's start with this one, with this column date and time as my time, and use the ref number for my X column. Okay, I can run it. and get what I need. Now let's clean up these a little bit. If I want to get rid of this column that I have created, I can just add in here in the setup, I can add a filter, and you'll see that has an exclude column. So let's say that anything that I'm creating here, both the ref num and the temp are going to be removed. And in addition, I don't like this name, so I'm going to change it. I'm going to go to an action of properties. And in here, I'm going to say that I want to call these relative actual time. So I type in the name. You have to make sure that it shows here to the right, so this will take place. Okay, I have done these selections, and I also, let's run it so I'll show you what I want to do and show you how to do it. I don't like the location of this relative actual time being at the end. Oh, and this was a mistake by me. What happened? I noticed it's not calculating it right. Why? Because I didn't sort by ID. So I have to make sure that here I'm sorting by ID. Okay, so it's doing the minimum per ID in my case. So it's the minimum per group is whatever your sort variables are going to be identifying. Right, so it's good to show that. And now you can see that this has been calculated correctly. Let's clean this, move this by putting this relative actual time in the column here. To do this, in the properties, you can see that you have a sort, so you can say how you want to sort the data. First by ID, maybe I want this, the date and time, then this one, and I want now the relative actual. And you can change the sort by going to the output sort order. So now I have the data set in a way that I want it. If this is something that you're going to be using often, you may want to create a template. I'm using a version 8, so 8.3, and all versions 8 have these. They have these object setting. In previous versions, it used to be called, I believe, was default templates, but this functionality was there just in a different location. I can click on these and say that I want to save these. This is a calculate a relative actual time, and it's kind of like a general. Okay, so I've just saved all this work that I did. And for illustration, I'm going to add another transformation here and just show you that the other one, the column with date and time variations where I have AM and PM also work. Okay, so we'll do the same thing. We'll do a baseline. You know what I'm doing now, so I'm just going to call this temp 2. I'm going to do minimum per group and make sure that I put the date format, sort by ID, use the ref num. Okay, I got to move this, so I'm going to move it up before the filter. Okay, so I have that ref num available to me. And this time I'm going to be using these time variations that have the AM and PM. So we're just going to run everything just to show you that all of those formats are accepted. This format or this format, you look here on the relative actual time, and this new one, they're exactly the same. Okay. And if I scroll down, the other ones have all these time deviations. They've also been calculated. All right, so I hope this helps in understanding a little bit of what is an easy way that you can do that is you have the dates that are combined like this, then you can just directly use a data wizard and a baseline transformation. All right, what if you had EU dates, like they were numeric? Well, one of the things that you can do is you can go to your Windows settings, you can go to this region setup in the control panel, and if you're working with other type of places in the world, you can select here the format, and then you will see what type of format is going to be understood. So if you wanted to change these to be date and month, you can change it, and then the same thing that I just showed you would work. Let's assume maybe that instead you have US times in your windows, but you really for this one time wanted to deal with changing the 01 to spelled out January. So everything is about the data wizard. There's many tricks within the data wizard, and you can send these to data management, go to the data wizard, and for simplicity, I'm going to load another template that I've already created. This is to process the EU dates. And the reason I'm doing this is a lot of typing. I don't have time in this 30-minute demo, but you will see that this transformation that I'm doing is to just look for a /01 and translate it to January. Of course, I have 12 each month. So if I click on the 7th, is looking for the month of 7, translated to July, and then substitute that. If I run this, I will get a new column, this temp 7 column, and this accepted EU date time. Okay, so now all I've done is take the 01, translate to January or September, and you can use this with the same baseline. So just to show you how what I said before it would be applied, I could take this result, send it to a data wizard, and remember that in the first demo, I saved an object setting. I will find it now, and it was this calculate relative actual time general. So I apply it and I just run it. Okay. So as long as you get, oh, something didn't run. I know what it is because I didn't have that column name. It was a little bit different. I need to use this accepted EU date and time. Okay. So very quickly, I can just use the same steps that I did, and I know that if I started with a date and a time together, I could get this calculation easily done. Other examples that I can show you is what if I'm starting a little bit different and now I have dates and times that are separated. I couldn't use this baseline trick, right? So again, it's just a matter of being able to manage the data to put it in that format. What would be a way to do this? You could send it to a data wizard and use a transformation of custom. And what you want to do here is concatenate the data. So I can create a date and time. Oops. And look for this function called concatenate. And there's a whole list of functions here. If this is the one that I want, I can drag it here and it says it's going to concatenate X and Y. And then I can map it. I can say, okay, well, the date is this date and the time is here. Now, if I do this, going to put it together without spaces, but I want a space in between. So I can just say, write it this way, indicating I want space when we concatenate this date and time. Once you execute this, sorry, I need to remap it. You now have this date and time in the format that I was showing you, and you can apply again the object setting, that template, to do that baseline transformation. So the trick here is to get the columns to look like this, and there's several tricks that I can show you, but that is one of them. Let me actually go to another format that might be interesting, where maybe you have the dose date and dose time in different columns, then you have the US sample, and I put US just because of having the month first and then the time in different columns. And now the trick is that maybe there was a pre-sample, like what we call the pre-dose sample at the time of dose, and they're in the same row, or maybe there was just no concentration measured here. And there could be other formats. I'm just showing you a few examples. For this one, because it takes a few steps in this webinar, I'm just going to show you the solution. Okay, so in this solution, I first have to combine the dose and sample. So how do I do this? I take advantage of something called date value. Date value gives you a number for each date, and I add the time value for the dose. So what I'm calculating here is a number that represents the dose date and dose time. I do the same for the time. Okay, so I take the US date and the US time. So this would be the sample time in numeric format. And then I do a big if statement. So you don't have to worry too much about this, but I'm showing you the power of being able to do this. I can say if it's missing, so if it's not missing, then I want to set this I want to do this check. I want to check if my sample date value is less than the dose date value. And if it is, then I concatenate the dose date and the dose time. If it's not, I'm going to concatenate the sample date and sample time. And if it was missing, I'm going to then set it to the dose date and dose time. So there's just tricks that you can do within the data wizard to be able to get it in the format that would work with a baseline change from baseline calculations. So just to execute this and show you that these statements created these dates and time in the format. So here in the first one, because this 755 was before the 8, then it picked the 8. So it's going to be able to calculate correctly to the dose time. And in this other example here, it was missing. So it picked also the dose time and put it all in one column. All right, so I hope that makes sense. We're 20 minutes into it. So I want to, in the last 5 minutes, talk about how to deal with dates and times when you're doing modeling. So for a Phoenix model, instead of wanting this or wanting relative actual time, you can deal with dates and times as long as they are in separate columns. So the other examples work well when you need to maybe create plots, do NCA. But when you are using a Phoenix model, you want to have your dates and your types separated this way. And again, if you had it in these formats, there are tricks in Data Wizard. You can use a right or a left statements to split those up in this manner. Now, when you send this data to a Phoenix model, I'm going to just make some selections here. We're not going to worry too much about what I'm selecting or any of my initial estimates. What I wanted to show you, I'm going to uncheck population, is there's an option under the input options tab. Okay? And this is called date. That's kind of date with a question mark. If you check that and you use this drop down menu, you will see that it accepts all these formats. Day, month, year, like most of the world, month, day, year, kind of like North America, maybe in Asia and in more international, the year first, and the year, day, and month. So you can select how does your data look like. In our case, if I want to put the preview, you will see that I have this date here that is in what I'm calling the European date. Okay, so I'm going to use the day, month, and year. Once you click this, you will see orange columns as a requirement in your mapping. So you're going to have to map those. And as I mentioned, they need to be separate columns. In our case, we're going to use the EU date and this time. And then we can make the other selections like the concentration, the dose, and we're going to sort by ID. All right, I'm not going to be talking too much about the fit necessarily, but what I want to show you is that the tool automatically takes those dates, understands the format, understands the time, and it calculates for you that relative actual time without having to do the work prior to the model. You can see these in the residuals. You can see that this calculation has taken place. And if maybe it's not showing time 0, because this is just the observations that I had that they were numeric. If you wanted the time 0, I could add a table right here, and I could request to output, let's see, I will say Windows. Let me get this model here. So Windows. I need to know the name that I gave it is AA. And when observed. Okay. And this will just create a table that will give us those observations. All right, so I hope that this has been useful to you. I wanted to comment that, and I'm sorry, I didn't show you this one here, but in this table, you will now see that you have also the dose as well as the samples. Great, so this concludes the demonstration part. I want to go back to the slides here and just kind of run over the conclusions. The conclusions is that you can use a data wizard transformation baseline to calculate these differences. It's going to be picking the smallest date and time within each sort. So if you have more than one sort variable, whatever is indicating the sort will be picking the smallest date and time. You will need to have a column that is numeric for each row. So if you, in order to be certain that you have that, you can create it yourself. And you work best if you have the time and date combined within a cell when you're using the data wizard. Many date formats are acceptable. Just be careful of your settings that you have in Windows, especially if with the month being before the day or the day being before the month. But to be certain, you can always spell it out. You can always spell the month out. And if you spell it out completely, it's acceptable, or if you use an abbreviation of 3 characters. Data Wizard is very powerful. It has many tools that can manipulate the data to get you into columns in the format that you need to do this transformation. And lastly, we talked about the Phoenix model that doesn't require relative time. It will accept different formats, it's pretty flexible, and you can select that in the input option tabs by selecting date. Great, so this gives me a few minutes for questions. Dawn, are there any questions?
We have someone, excuse me, I'm sorry. We have someone that wants to know if this morning's presentation will be made available to them.
Sure. So yes, and that actually leads me to the next slide that I have here. At Certara University, we have a course that has all the webinars that we have done. All the recordings are within this complimentary course. It's a 001 TU. So if you sign up for it, the recording will be there for this webinar under the 2021 series. And we have the 2020 and the 2019 in there too, as well as other short videos for tips. So I recommend that you go there. You will get an email too with this link. And if people are interested, I could also attach this Phoenix project if it's helpful to you. I can attach it to that. Now it's version 8.3, so some folks, depending on the version that you're using, you might not be able to upload it. All right, and since we just have a couple more minutes left, maybe, and I'm sorry, Dawn, but I'm going to maybe put the questions and answers. I'll put it also within this recording, and we will do it in writing later. I wanted to remind you that there's other webinars coming up. I hope you enjoyed this one, and the next one will be by Keith Nifford. Was going to be doing part 1 of introduction of RS and LME, and then the part 2 will follow on May 12th. And also my colleague Simon Davis will show you how to integrate some R code within Phoenix in April. Okay, so I hope that you can join us for these other Express webinars. And this is it. This concludes this webinar. Please visit Certara University to learn about training opportunities for your professional development in the PK/PD area. I hope this was helpful. You can disconnect now.